I got my big table saw set up. Made a couple jigs. This one here is to hold the boards down tight to the top of the table saw so they don't come up. And then this one is to hold it so it can't move away from the blades. And I got a dado set in there, I don't know if you can see, to cut a 1/2 inch groove and then 3/8 up. And the way I'm doing this, I got a couple test pieces done, is both grooves are going to be identical. And then I'll use a spacer. I'll just have something quick that I can put in there to get my little gap that I want. That way I can pick which side of the board I want when it comes time to put them up. Alright, so the process of grooving these boards took longer than I thought. I probably had 5 or 6 hours in grooving all these boards. My sister helped me for a couple hours one day, and then I did a bunch myself, and then Emily helped me for probably 3 hours to finish up. But when I was talking about those 2 jigs that I made, another important thing that they do is they protect your hands from those blades. When you're doing this much work on the table saw, I felt like having those boards there would keep me from making a mistake and hitting my hand on that blade. So it kind of served 2 purposes. It held the board in place, but it also protected my hand, being that this took such a long time to do. So by making the grooves exactly the same, you could just run the board through on one side, turn it over, and run it back through without having to change anything. So the total width of my groove is a 1/2 inch, and then it's 3/8 deep, so it's half of the board's thickness deep. And that way I overlapped a 1/4 inch, and I got 7 inches of coverage on each board. And I'll show you a little bit later in the video what the end of these boards look like when they're installed. By grooving them like this, you make sure you have plenty of room for those boards to expand and contract with the temperature differences. I'm going to take you through how I prepare these boards. So I got 10 footers and 12 footers, and the first thing I do is I'll take a board, and I kind of went through when I picked these boards out and tried to get the straightest one. So I looked down the side, and this one's straight. So I'm going to use this as a full length board. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thing over to the table saw, square off the end, and then cut it to exactly 12 feet because this is a 12 footer. So this one looks pretty straight. If it was crooked, I would section it out and make it into smaller pieces, if that makes sense. So if I get one that's kind of crooked, there's usually a section of that board that I can get a good straight 4 foot out, or 6 foot, or an 8 foot, and then where it starts to curve, you can use that as a smaller section. So you can pretty much use all of these boards. You just have to kind of section them out if they're crooked. All right, once I determine what length I'm going to cut each of these boards, I cut them on my miter saw. If you can watch me right here, I'm going to cross my arms, which is something you should not do. The reason I have to do this is because I don't have extensions on my miter saw, and that's the only way I can hold the board. So do what I say, not what I do. I should really get extensions for this. It's a good way to cut your arm off. However, I've done this enough that before I make a cut on these saws, I always account for my hands and my arms, not making an excuse. I'm just pointing out a mistake I made, and something you should practice is not crossing your arms. So now that I have this cut to length, I'm going to look at both sides and determine which side I want to use. The way I groove these is it's the exact same groove on each side, so I can pick which side of the board I want, and I like this one. It's obviously smooth. It's a little bit smoother, less imperfection. So this is going to be the side that's going to face down. So I'm going to take it over. I'll lightly sand it, and then I'll paint this edge and this edge. All right, so like I said, once I get the boards ready, I lightly sand the side that's going to face down, and then I prime those grooves. This is a step you wouldn't have to do if you're just going to seal these boards, but we're going to paint this white, so I'm priming those edges because I was a little bit nervous that when I spray this, I won't be able to get primer and paint up in that groove the way I want to, so I'm just kind of preparing that ahead of time. All right, guys, so the first day that I worked on this, I had my buddy Travis here. He came and helped me. You guys probably remember him if you watched the whole series. He helped me when I built the structure, but unfortunately, I lost all of the video for the first day, kind of my own mistake when I was capturing it on my computer, and I talked about a lot of things that day, so I'm going to try to just go over some of those things. And one of them was when I started putting these boards up, how I staggered them. And so my ceiling joists are 2 foot on center. So I started with a 10-foot board, then I did an 8, a 6, a 4, a 2, and then I would put up full length 10 or 12-foot boards after that, and then finish measure to get my finished board length, if that makes sense. So by starting with a 10 and stepping down 2 feet each one, that way every 5th board shares a seam, if that makes sense. But you get a good stagger by doing that, and it looks really nice. So as far as spacing the boards, I used my carpenter's pencil. When I would hold the board up, I would stick my pencil in the groove to get my spacing, and that gave me a nice consistent space all the way across. As far as making sure that my runs were all staying perpendicular, I would use the trusses. My trusses are 8 foot on center, so that was a nice, easy thing to measure to make sure I wasn't getting off one way or the other. And actually going across the whole thing, when I got down to the end, I was off maybe like 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch is all. All right, I'm putting this board up, guys, and this is one instance you're going to come across is when the board is a little bit warped and it angles towards your others. This one's a little bit easier. You just take your little crowbar. This is going to be difficult holding this camera, but get your crowbar up in there, and then you can just pry it over. Goofball. Get back here. Alright guys, when you have a gap and you need to push the board in, you just got to screw, my buddy Travis came up with this, just screw a block right up next to it so you have something to pry against to push it back in. So that's what we're going to do right now. So block that, push it in, and nail it. Alright, well, I finally screwed up a board, and it's on one with 2 cuts, and I have no idea what I did, but I cut this light circle out like an inch too big, which is funny because that one I did fine, but this one I didn't. So I'm going to take this board down, and these screw or nails I'm using are these 2-inch brad nails, and you're going to see how good they hold right now as I take this down. I kind of popped the end loose already. Hopefully without tearing this. So you can see how good those hold. Like once they're in there, your board stays up there. The only way you get that board off is by prying it off, and the nails actually all stay up there and they pull through this board. So that's how strong these little brad nails are. So we've established how strong these little 18 gauge brad nails are. They're 2 inches long, but one thing I do is I angle them opposite ways when I put them in the boards. And that helps. If there was ever any movement in these ceiling joists or whatever, and you had them all just straight in or all at the same angle, that board could potentially vibrate loose over time. But if you put one in this way and then alternate the angle, that increases the holding power of those nails. And as you can see, when I took that off, that it pulled them all through before those nails came off. So now I got to pull all those nails and make a new board. But I guess that's not bad. I made it about, I don't know, I made it about 38 feet before I screwed up, so not bad, I guess. Alright, so a lot of times when you're doing stuff like this and you screw a board up, you can salvage it. I'm going to be able to get some pieces out of this to finish out these runs. So I think I can get a couple at least. So the whole board won't go to waste. So I was able to salvage pretty much this whole board. This one, my ceiling joist down here is 16 on center, so I'll be able to use this. I just cut it 48, so that'll work for a piece down here. So another thing besides a crooked board that you might encounter is a knot like this that will kind of screw up your overlap. So when I come across a board like this, I set it in its own pile, and then I'll come back and try to pull pieces out of it that are long enough. So this one will probably work for a, just works, that's perfect. So I have 62 3/8. So you can see that I was able to pretty much maximize the use of this board. So then I can, once I take this out, I'll get the longest piece out I can this way, and then I'm not wasting much of a board. So those are just a couple little tips. If you have a warped board, look down it. Usually you'll see that there's a section that's straight. Get the longest section out of that, and then use the rest for short pieces, like a 24-inch piece or a 16-inch piece. And with these ones with knots that maybe screw up your overlap, do the same thing. Just get the longest piece out there you can. And a lot of times, I mean, you can see there, I'm not wasting hardly any of this at all. Alright, so the question you're probably asking me, is it worth it to make your own shiplap, and why wouldn't you just buy the pre-made stuff? And if we look at this project, I went ahead and figured out what it would cost to get the pre-finished shiplap, and it was $2,000 more than what I will have in to this custom-made shiplap. So I have about $1,750 in this shiplap that I'm going to be putting in the house, and if I'd have bought the same stuff pre-finished, pre-made, it'd have been almost $3,700. So that's a $2,000 difference. So to me, that's worth it. I mean, that's an extra $2,000 I can put towards something else. If you have the extra cash and you want to, pay for the pre-finished stuff, then by all means do it. But for me, that's enough savings that I wanted to do it myself, and it gave my wife and I the look that we were trying to accomplish in this space. But anyway, I really appreciate everybody watching. Hopefully this was helpful to somebody, and we will catch you on the next video.